इन द डिमांड लाइक वी सेड अर्लियर हम लोग क्या करेंगे, हम लोग बनाएंगे इनकम ऑफ अ कर्व या इनकम कंजम्पशन कर्व एंड प्राइस ऑफ अ कर्व या प्राइस कंजम्पशन कर्व। इससे हम अपना डिराइव करेंगे एंजल कर्व और इससे हम डिराइव करेंगे अपना डिमांड कर्व। इसको करने के हमारे पास दो तरीके होते हैं। द सेम थिंग कैन बी डन इन टू वेज। एक हम करते हैं डायग्रामेटिकली और दूसरा हम करते हैं न्यूमेरिकली। तो सबसे पहले लेट्स लुक एट इनकम ऑफ अ कर्व या इनकम कंजम्पशन कर्व डायग्रामेटिकली। हमने क्या किया, हमने बोला हमारे पास एक बजट लाइन थी ए बी, उस पर हम कंज्यूम कर रहे थे ई नॉट। When my income increased, I moved from AB to A1, B1, and obviously I moved from consumption of E0 to E1. मेरी income further increase हुई, I moved to the budget line A2, B2 और मैं कहाँ पे आ गई E2 पे। जब मैं अपने ओरिजिन के साथ इन तीनों पॉइंट्स को कंबाइन कर लेती हूँ, this curve is called income consumption curve or income offer curve. This curve is called income consumption curve or income offer curve. Second is कि जब मेरी income increase हुई तो मैंने x1 को increase किया, मेरी income further increase हुई, मैंने x1 को further increase किया, which means that if I take income and x1 on the two axes, it's going to be an upward sloping curve. Why? Because as my income is increasing, my consumption of good one is also increasing. This is called an angel curve for good one. Similarly, when I seek for good two, income increased, good two consumption increased. Income further increased, good two consumption further increased. So if I draw another curve, again with income on the y-axis and x2 on the x-axis, it's going to be an upward sloping curve. This is called the angel curve for good two. It is as simple as that. हमने क्या किया, सिंपली स्पीकिंग हमने इनकम बढ़ाई तो हमारी बजट लाइन आउटवर्ड मूव करती गई। हर एक न्यू बजट लाइन पे हमने एक नया आईसी बना के इक्विलिब्रियम बनाया। व्हेन यू जॉइन दिस लाइन टुगेदर वी गेट आवर इनकम कंजम्पशन कर्व और इनकम ऑफर कर्व। क्योंकि हम कॉब डगलस की बात कर रहे हैं तो हमें पता है कि हमारे जो दोनों गुड्स हैं वो गुड्स हैं, विच मीन्स कि जब मेरा इनकम इंक्रीज करेगा तो x1 भी इंक्रीज करेगा, x2 भी इंक्रीज करेगा। दूसरा हमें पता है कि कॉब डगलस के केसेस में इसीलिए हमारा इनकम ऑफ अ कर्व या इनकम कंजम्पशन कर्व जो है वो क्या होता है, इट इज अपवर्ड स्लोपिंग। Why is it upward sloping? Because with an increase in income, जब income increase होती है तो हमारी जो consumption है good one और good two की वो भी increase होती है। With an increase in income, the consumption of good one and good two both increase, which is why हमारा जो consumption curve है that is upward sloping, and the angel curves are also upward sloping. Let's see numerically the same thing. Let's suppose u is equal to, हमारे पास था ना u is equal to x1 c x2d. I'm just taking as x1 x2. Okay, for the sake of understanding right now, subject to p1 x1 plus p2 x2 is equal to m. I want to find out the angel curves. Okay, so then how do I do that? The first step is I know कि Cobb Douglas है, first step is Cobb Douglas है तो equilibrium की condition हमें पता है, it is tangency. Once I know equilibrium condition is tangency, I can apply it by saying MRS should be equal to the price ratio. MRS is x2 by x1, which is equal to the price ratio, which implies that x2 should be equal to P1 by P2 x1, and similarly for x1, right? So I have P1 x1 plus P2 x2 की जगह can I write P1 upon P2 into x1 to be equal to m? This P2 and P2 gets cancelled. So can I write x1 is equal to m upon 2p1, and similarly x2 is equal to p1 and p1 gets cancelled, m upon 2p2. तो अब हमारे पास क्या आया, मेरे पास एंजल कर्व की इक्वेशन आ गई। x1 is equal to m upon 2p1. एंजल कर्व मीन्स कि हम इनकम को चेंज कर रहे हैं। जब हम इनकम को चेंज करते हैं तो हम p1 और p2 को कांस्टेंट अज्यूम कर लेते हैं। When I'm changing m, I'm assuming p1 and p2 to be constant. And in this one, अगर p1 constant है, so when m increases, x1 increases, which is why it's an upward sloping curve. कभी कभार they ask you to find out the slope of the angel curve. Sometimes the question asks us to find the slope of the angel curve. That is also very simple. You differentiate x1 with respect to m. You differentiate x1 with respect to m. You get 1 upon 2 p1. P1 is constant, mind you, which means this entire thing is also constant. If this is constant, that means that my angel curve will be a straight line. My angel curve will be a straight line. तो हमारे को क्या पता लगा? हमें पता लगा कि एंजल कर्व जो है उसकी स्लोप जो है वो कांस्टेंट है. So let me reiterate myself. The first question is कि angel curve की equation क्या है? The moment you write x1 is equal to m by 2 p1, this is the angel curve equation. To make it more this thing, you put p1 के ऊपर bar because p1 is supposed to be constant. Second thing is the slope of the angel curve. For the slope of the angel curve, you do del x1 upon del m, which comes out to be 1 upon 2 p1 bar. Since this is constant, therefore, my slope of angel curve is also constant, which means now when I draw the curve, I will draw a straight line, not a curve, but a straight line, right? What about the ICC? What is the ICC change? How is the ICC changing? You see, ICC में हमारे पास 3 elements change हो रहे हैं. Income change हो रही है, उसकी वजह से x1 भी change हो रहा है और x2 भी change हो रहा है. तो इसलिए उसको हम numerically दिखा ही नहीं सकते. उसको हम न्यूमेरिकली दिखा ही नहीं सकते. उसको हम कैसे दिखा सकते हैं? सिर्फ और सिर्फ डायग्रामेटिकली. हमारे को एंजल कर्व गुड 2 की भी बोली जा सकती है. गुड 2 की होगी अगर तो इसको हम x2 कर देंगे, ये हमारा p2 है, बिकॉज दिस इज व्हाट वी हैव हियर ना, m अपॉन 2 p2. m अपॉन 2 p2 को अगर आप del x2 बाय del m करोगे तो अगेन 2 p2 आएगा, वो भी कांस्टेंट है, इसलिए उसकी भी स्लोप हमारी constant होगी. So m upon x, m by x1, this is the angel curve, the slope is constant. The same thing if you draw for x2, this is also constant. So this is what my ICC is all about. Diagrammatically, upward sloping, angel curve also upward sloping, but with a constant slope. That is in Cobb Douglas situation of u is equal to x1 into x2. बाकियों में कैसे होगा? We don't know. We will see 1 to more examples to make a conclusion. All right. Let's look at the price of a curve. Price of a curve or price consumption curve. इसके अंदर हम एक गुड का प्राइस कंटिन्यूसली कम करते जाते हैं. So initially I was on AB. I was consuming at point E0. Price of good 1 fell. We moved from AB to AB1. We moved from E0 to E1. Price of good 1 further fell. हम AB1 से AB2 पे आ गए, E1 से E2 पे आ गए. Again, when you join all these points together, this is called the price of a curve or price consumption curve. For normal goods, it should be upward sloping. Why upward sloping? Because for normal goods, जब price fall करता है, तो quantity increase करती है. Price fall कर रहा है, quantity should be rising throughout, which is why it should be upward sloping. You can see that when P1 falls, Q1 is rising. The Q1 is rising. When P is falling, X1 is rising, which is why we have a negatively sloping curve. When P is falling, X1 is rising. We have a negatively sloping curve, right? This is my demand curve. इसको हम एक बार न्यूमेरिकली निकालें. U is equal to X1 X2 subject to P1 X1 plus P2 X2 is equal to M. हम लोगों ने कैलकुलेट किया था x1 was coming out to be m by p1 and x2 was coming out to be m by p2. So I've skipped all the steps here because I'm assuming you know them already. Cobb Douglas है, convex होगा, convex है, tangency होगी, tangency में MRS is equal to the price ratio. You know all that. Eventually we come here. Now here when you have x1 and x2, this m1 upon 2 p1 and m upon 2 p2. This is the equation of demand curve as well. I know you must be thinking कि ये तो हमने angel curve की equation बोली थी. दोनों elements है ना इसके अंदर. When you show the relationship between income and good 1, that's angel curve. When you show the relationship between P1 and X1, that is demand curve. Since in this equation we have the relationship between M and P1 both, that's why it is the equation of demand curve as well as angel curve. एंजल कर्व के अंदर हमने P1 को कांस्टेंट किया था, डिमांड कर्व बिकॉज P1 और X1 का रिलेशनशिप शो करता है, इसलिए हम इसके अंदर क्या कांस्टेंट करेंगे, M को. So in this one we can see that when P1 rises, X1 falls, which means it is a normal downward sloping demand curve. It is a normal downward sloping demand curve. क्यों? क्योंकि इसमें opposite relationship है. So it's a normal downward sloping demand curve. When P rises, X1 falls. When P1 rises, X1 falls. What is the slope? What is the slope? So because of P1, what are the changes in X1 is the slope. So del X1 by del P1 is how we figure out the slope. So you can actually write it as, you can rewrite it and then get the slope. Right? That will be minus M bar upon 2 P1 square. Why the minus sign? Why the minus sign? Inverse relationship. Why the minus sign? Inverse relationship. Is this a straight line? No, this is not constant. It's dependent on P1. So it will be a curve. कौन सा curve है? We don't care. हम उतनी depth में नहीं जाते हैं. But we simply know that this is my demand curve. We can repeat the analysis for good too. For the sake of understanding, एक और case करते हैं Cobb Douglas का. Let's say I have a curve like x1 square x2, subject to P1 x1 plus P2 x2 is equal to M. For the demand curve and the angel curve, you will always take P1, P2 and M to be unknowns. You will always take P1, P2 and M to be unknowns. ठीक है? Cobb Douglas है. Equilibrium will be at the tangency. Condition will be MRS is equal to the price ratio. What is MRS? 2x1 x2 upon 2x1 x2 upon x1 square is my MRS, which is equal to the price ratio P1 by P2. So this and this gets cancelled. So I have 2x2 upon x1 is equal to P1 by P2, which implies that x2 is equal to P1 by P2 upon 2 into x1, and x1 will be equal to 2x2 into P2 by P1. Let's put it back in the equation. So I have P1 x1 plus P2 x2 की जगह can I write P1 upon 2 P2 into x1 is equal to M. This then comes out to be P1 x1 plus this P2 and P2 gets cancelled. So I have again P1 x1 upon 2 is equal to M. So which is 3 P1 x1 upon 2 is equal to M. So that implies x1 is equal to 2M upon 3P1. 2M upon 3P1. इससे अगर हम निकालें slope of angel curve, then that will be del x1 upon del m. And if I find out slope of demand curve, that will be del x1 upon del P1. In this one, you will take P1 to be constant. In this one, you will take M to be constant. The ratio has changed, rest everything remains the same. So this is how you can calculate any Cobb Douglas, ICC, PCC, angel curve, demand curves, the slope of angel curve and the slope of demand curve. ICC के लिए हम reiterating, income बढ़ाते जाओ, equilibrium बढ़ता जाएगा, सबको एक लाइन में डाल दो, that's your ICC या income of a curve. Normal goods के लिए हमेशा upward sloping होगा. Price of a curve, अगेन प्राइस को कम करते जाओगे, बजट लाइन आउटवर्ड स्पिंडल करती जाएगी, इक्विलिब्रियम बनाते जाओ, सबको ज्वाइन कर दो. दैट लाइन इज कॉल्ड प्राइस ऑफ अ कर्व. उससे हमारे पास क्या आएगा, उससे हमारे पास डिमांड कर्व आएगा. हमारे पास इक्वेशंस कैसे आएंगी, न्यूमेरिकली आप P1 P2 M को अननोन रखोगे तो अब हमेशा आ जाएंगी. यू जस्ट हैव टू अप्लाई द इक्विलिब्रियम कंडीशन एंड सॉल्व. इट इज एज सिंपल एज दैट. इन द नेक्स्ट फ्यू वीडियोस हम डिफरेंट फंक्शंस की चीज़ करते जाएंगे. अभी हमने कॉब डगलस की करी है या इन अ वे कॉन्वेक्स आईसीस की करी है. नेक्स्ट फ्यू के अंदर हम लोग परफेक्ट सब्स्टिट्यूट्स, परफेक्ट कॉम्प्लीमेंट्स, क्वाज़ी लीनियर, डिस्क्रीट की करेंगे. दैट विल बी आवर एंटायर चैप्टर. ऑलराइट, थैंक यू.